Charles Oliveira picked up a unanimous decision victory over Michael Chandler over the weekend at UFC 309 co-main event. Oliveira was happy with the result, but wasn't happy with some of the things that happened during the fight, some of the things that Chandler did during the fight. Firstly, illegal strikes to the back of the head. Oliveira counted more than 6 shots, more than 6 illegal blows to the back of the head. He thinks it's kind of messed up that he did that, and also messed up that the referee just stood there and let it happen. If he kept going there, I could have got injured, I could have went out, I could have got injured bad. And on the back of his head, Oliveira says there's one lump after another that you can see. Besides the illegal shots to the back of the head, there was also eye pokes. There was an eye poke in the first round, and there was an eye poke in the 5th round. The one in the 5th round completely changed the momentum of the fights. Oliveira says after the first eye poke in the first round, Chandler acted like he did nothing wrong, and that upset him because he's saying, if I said I eye poked you, I did. Besides the shots to the back of the head, besides the eye pokes, there was also the illegal fence grabs that Chandler did to prevent takedowns that upset Oliveira. Oliveira says he was grabbing the cage. He grabbed the top of the cage at one point. Oliveira says he even grabbed the cage with both hands at one point to try and stop takedowns. Again, no points were deducted for these fouls, and no stoppage to warn him was done either by referee Keith Peterson. And in the 5th round, I got poked in the eye once again. Oliveira is essentially saying the entire 5th round comeback sequence was facilitated by a bunch of illegal moves because it was the eye poke, he says, which hurt him and impacted him the most, and the strikes on the ground which impacted him were all illegal strikes to the back of the head. And Charles Oliveira is not really a guy who says these kinds of things. He's not really a guy who talks in this manner and complains. So if you know he's saying something like this, something's up. And also, a lot of this stuff was clearly visible and obvious to everyone watching. Multitude of fouls committed by Chandler. If points were actually deducted during the fight, this fight could have been scored something like 50-25 when it was all said and done. People may empathize with Poirier more now after the way he acted after his fight with Michael Chandler, being reluctant to exchange pleasantries after the fight because he was subjected to a bunch of illegal tactics during that fight. He was labeled a sore winner. But you can win a fight and still be mad at the things that went down during the fight, as Charles Oliveira currently is. Michael Chandler does have that persona outside of the cage of having integrity, honesty, accountability, and morality, and maybe he does live by those principles outside of the cage. I don't know if he does or he doesn't outside of the cage, but inside of the cage in competition, he competes by the exact opposite standard, cheating almost every step of the way in almost every round of competition. His toughness, heart, and will is impossible to deny, but equally impossible to deny is his usage of illegal tactics. Currently, Charles Oliveira sits in the number 2 position in the lightweight rankings behind Sarukian and Makhachev, who will be fighting against each other next, likely main eventing UFC 311 January 18th in Los Angeles. Charles Oliveira wants to be cage side for that fight and call out the winner of that fight. Michael Chandler interested in taking on Max Holloway next for a BMF title fight. It would be an interesting fight. Neither of these guys are ever in boring fights. Gamrot wants to fight Chandler, calls him a chicken. Any momentum in Gamrot's career always gets halted. Dariush stopped his momentum after he beat Sarukian, then he won 3 straight and Dan Hooker beat him. So now he's number 8, 1 below Chandler, hence he wants to fight Chandler. Shavkat Rakhmonov training with Nasruddin Imavov leading up to his fight with Ian Gary. Shavkat's a huge welterweight. Maybe that size will play a factor in the grappling exchanges. Speaking of huge, Darren Till says he's 253 pounds, a couple months out from his fight with Tommy Fury. All indications seem to point towards Till getting smoked in that boxing bout. Undefeated Loney Kavanaugh makes his UFC debut on Saturday. Ryan Hall may be moving down to bantamweight in early 2025. He's been sidelined for years, getting around 20 surgeries. UFC officially announces the rescheduling of this fight, Weidman versus Anders, UFC 310, December 7. Zach Bryan apparently paid a couple UFC fighters to walk out to the song and a fighter to shout him out in the post-fight Octagon interview. The theory is he did all this to irritate his ex-girlfriend who was in attendance at the event.
So, This past Saturday night, UFC New York, Bryan Chicken Fry goes to the event, her first UFC event. She's advertising, she's going, she's all over the place. Everyone knows she's going. During the fights, this guy, David Anamo, wins the fight, gets in the middle of the ring, and gives Zach Bryan a shout. He's like, you know, I'm so happy, Zach Bryan, like this one's for him. Can't wait to see his show in a couple weeks.
To watch, what's it called, Zach Bryan concert. So I'll be there, I'll be here for that.
Obviously, people are like, oh, that's gonna suck for Brie, like she's there, and they're getting a Zach Bryan shout out. This guy, David Anamo, goes on a podcast. It was so odd. The podcasters are like, what's up with Zach Bryan? You're a big Zach Bryan fan? The UFC guy, he's like, I don't even know who Zach Bryan is. His manager, his team reached out to my team, like begging for a shout out. He doesn't even know who Zach Bryan is. This small little 4'8" psychopath is that pathetic and that lost where they gotta beg UFC guys for a shout out just to try to rub it in. Like, Bryan gives a we know you're popular, Zach. You don't need to bribe people to say your name, you pathetic little man. They did the same thing with a walkout too for Something in the Orange. What a pathetic, like, dude, we get you world famous, but everybody knows you're a piece of shit loser, and now we know how pathetic and small and low you are. And by the way, it's embarrassing. You look like the smallest man who ever lived. And listen, you can like his music. He has good music. This guy is the worst.
Bo Nickel originally didn't like DC's comments about him during his fight with Paul Craig, but now he sees them and he sees he has room for improvement. Bo's problem is he got so good so fast. Huge expectations come with that, and he made it worse by talking crazy like he's going to beat Hamzat immediately when he gets into the UFC. He scaled back on that, but if you strip away the hype, the name, and you just look at his record, if you didn't know who this guy was, just looked at his record. For his 7th fight to beat Paul Craig, that's pretty impressive. Craig's a guy who stopped Ankalaev. Craig's a guy who beat Jamal Hill. He's a good fighter. So for someone in their 7th fight to win a unanimous decision over Craig is impressive. But Nickel regrets not having enough aggression in the striking department. My only small regret is not being more aggressive in the 3rd round after I hurt him. I need to build a better system to attack when my opponent is hurt. Former middleweight champion and current light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira sparring in South Korea with middleweight contender Jun Young Park. Jun Young Park is coming off a victory last month over Brad Tavares.